Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to uh, really give you a shortcut to understanding one of the most expensive problems in a modern workplace.
Yeah,
And it's a problem that's usually silent. We're talking about the high cost of things that are not being said.
exactly.
We're diving into a really fascinating piece of analysis from Phoenix Performance Partners. It's an article called The Price of Conflict Avoidance, and it kind of flips a common assumption on its head right from the start.
It really does, because you think about high costs,
The
you think about, open warfare in the office, the big argument, the shouting match,
Right, the drama.
the drama. But the whole premise here, and this is what's so surprising, is that the real cost isn't the conflict itself. It's the avoidance of conflict.
Mhm.
The article calls it expensive silence. And that silence is, well, it's quietly bankrupting organizations.
Okay, so expensive silence. Let's define that because this isn't just, an awkward moment in the elevator. This is stuff we all recognize.
Absolutely.
It's the classic meeting after the meeting, right? Where
Mm.
everyone files out and then the real feedback happens in the hallway. But it's never with the person who needed to hear it.
Never. Or it's dodging that difficult conversation and instead just venting to a coworker.
Yeah.
The whole place becomes this web of what the article calls gossip and avoidance.
And when you pull the lens back, the scale of this, it's just staggering. And the article connects these behaviors to some really sobering statistics.
They're pretty shocking. You look at the Gallup numbers.
Yeah.
2/3 of U.S. workers are disengaged. 2/3.
Wow.
And of that group, 74% are either actively looking for a new job or they're open to it.
So they have one foot out the door.
Completely.
Mm.
And you can measure the financial hit.
Mm.
The stress from all this costs the U.S. economy something like $500 billion a year. That turns into 550 million sick days.
Yeah.
That's the price tag.
Okay, let's unpack that. I mean, how does one person deciding not to speak up in one meeting, how does that snowball into a massive systemic problem?
It becomes systemic because it creates what the source calls a predictable cascade of dysfunction. It's a chain reaction.
Okay.
So a problem comes up. Could be anything, a process flaw, a personality clash.
Yeah.
The individual's first instinct in this kind of culture is to retreat, protect their own comfort zone.
So they don't send the email. They don't make the call.
Exactly. They withhold that key piece of feedback. And immediately, miscommunication starts to multiply. Resentment builds up. And the most critical thing, trust, just begins to erode.
So it's not one big event. It's the accumulation of all these little unresolved moments.
That's the perfect way to put it. And the article has this great metaphor for it. It calls it organizational plaque.
Like plaque in your arteries.
Precisely. All these unresolved issues, they build up over time, and they start to restrict the flow of vital information and honest feedback. Decision-making slows to a crawl, and the whole system starts to get starved of what it needs to be healthy.
That's a powerful image. You're just constantly working around blockages instead of actually moving forward.
You are. And that brings us to the really interesting part of this analysis,
The hidden costs.
the hidden taxes,
Yeah.
the things that never show up on a P&L sheet but are draining the company dry.
Okay, so let's break these down. What's the first one?
The first, and maybe the most fundamental, is the innovation tax.
Meaning,
Mhm.
if you're afraid of conflict, you can't challenge anything.
You just can't. Think about it. Innovation means proposing something new, something that might face criticism or disagreement. If you're in a culture where that disagreement is seen as this terrible, scary thing,
You just keep your mouth shut.
you stick to, well, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
The courage to innovate just becomes too expensive for people to pay.
Okay, so that's ideas. But what about people? I mean, if you can't challenge a process, I'm guessing you can't challenge a person's performance either.
And you've just landed on the second tax, the accountability tax.
Yeah.
It's basically impossible to hold people accountable without having direct, sometimes difficult conversations.
Yeah.
So when leaders, or even just colleagues, are unwilling to say, hey, that's not up to standard, the problems they fester. And what happens is the standard itself just drifts lower and lower for everyone.
Which leads to more meetings to talk about the problems that no one is actually naming.
Yes. Which is the third tax,
Yep.
the decision-making tax. Teams just spend hours and hours in meetings dancing around the real issues.
I think we've all been in that meeting.
We all have. The best decision often requires the most debate, right? But in an avoidance culture, decisions get delayed, they get watered down until they're useless, or they just happen by default because no one made an active choice.
So if you're a high performer, you're sitting in these meetings, seeing the lack of accountability, and you must just get incredibly
You
frustrated.
get frustrated and then you leave. That's the talent tax. Your best employees, the ones with options, they aren't going to stick around for that.
They see the writing on the wall.
They see that leadership either doesn't see the problems or, worse, they don't care enough to fix them. And they find a place where their work can actually have an impact.
And the last one, I feel like this is the one that everyone feels personally. The energy tax.
This one is maybe the most insidious. It's the sheer psychological energy you burn just managing around conflicts.
Oh, yeah.
All the time you spend strategizing how to avoid someone in the hallway or rereading an email 50 times to make sure it's perfectly diplomatic.
All that brain power.
It's completely consumed by avoidance instead of being focused on the mission. It is exhausting.
So if these taxes are so high, I mean, why do we keep paying them? What's going on in our heads that fuels this whole culture of avoidance?
Well, it's all rooted in fear, but that fear shows up in a few specific ways. The first is a mindset of assuming nefarious intent.
Meaning, we just assume the worst in people.
Yeah. When you don't have open dialogue, you have a vacuum. And we fill that vacuum with the most negative story possible. My coworker missed a deadline, so I assume they're lazy, not that they were totally overloaded and needed help.
And that kind of thinking just fractures the team, I'd imagine.
It creates silos. This is what the article calls exclusion. The organization breaks up into these little cliques and alliances because you're actively avoiding the people and perspectives that might make you uncomfortable.
And people start to feel like there's nothing they can do about it.
Which is the next mindset, powerlessness. People just feel resigned. They disengage because they genuinely believe that speaking up won't change a thing, so why bother?
And this gets reinforced when the company says one thing but does another.
That's the final piece, incongruence. The company values on the wall say transparency and collaboration, but everybody operates under these unspoken rules about the topics you don't touch.
The elephant in the room.
And that disconnect just feeds this whole vicious cycle. You get poor results, which creates more fear, which drives more avoidance, which of course leads to even worse results.
So that raises a really important question for me. Is this a personality problem? Some people are just naturally non-confrontational. Or is it something else?
That's the critical question, and the article is very clear on this. While personality is a factor, conflict avoidance at a cultural level is fundamentally a leadership issue.
Not a personality issue.
Not at its core. The culture is set by what leaders model, what they encourage, and maybe most importantly, what they tolerate. If a leader lets gossip slide, they're sending a message that dysfunction is normal.
So the real shift has to come from the top. It's about moving from being, fear-based to purpose-driven.
Exactly. A fear-based leader tries to eliminate all discomfort. A purpose-driven leader accepts temporary discomfort because it serves something more important, like the mission or the health of the team.
And that shift is what the article calls active resolution.
Right. It's about changing the question you ask yourself. You stop asking, how can I avoid this conflict? And you start asking, how can I address this in a way that actually strengthens our relationship and moves our mission forward?
So at its heart, the message is to replace that whole cycle of gossip and avoidance with a direct conversation.
A direct conversation. And look, that conversation might be uncomfortable for 10 minutes. Your heart might pound a little. But the argument here is that 10 minutes of discomfort is so much cheaper than the chronic grinding cost of avoidance and all those hidden taxes.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've laid out the costs. Lost innovation, no accountability, your best people leaving, and just exhausted teams. Every day you're making a choice, right? Engage or let it slide.
And the great thing is, you don't have to start by solving the biggest problem in the company. The change begins with one small, manageable action. The article has a great section called Try This Today.
Okay, so this is the immediate action step.
Exactly. First, just identify one smallish issue you've been avoiding, something you know you should address directly but haven't.
Okay, got one in my head.
Now, ask yourself the first question. What is continuing to avoid this already costing me or my team? Get really specific. Is it wasting time, energy, trust?
And the second question.
Second, you ask, what outcome would actually serve the mission here and make our working relationship better? It forces you to think beyond just venting and toward a constructive goal.
And then the final step, which is probably the most important.
It is. You have to actually schedule the conversation. put it in the calendar. Make it real this week. Don't just think about it.
It's about building that muscle.
It's all about building that muscle because the journey from resignation to real engagement, from dysfunction to high performance, it runs directly through that willingness to have the conversation.
So the final thought the article leaves us with is a really provocative one.
It is. It just asks, when you look at all these staggering costs and all these hidden taxes, can you or your organization really afford not to make this shift?